The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
What are some of the projections that Michael Preiss, an investment analyst and author at Forbes Georgia, has? Georgi Sakadze will tell us more.
Hi, Elene. I welcome all our viewers and followers, and many thanks for the attention and feedback for the checkpoints. Yes, you are absolutely right. Mr. Preiss, Michael Rainer Preiss, our strategic partner and advisor to whom we really trust due to his precious experience, what he has in relations with various strategic investors. He still considers that it's quite difficult, and it's still difficult to make any kind of prognosis, analysis, or predictions in regards how world economy will definitely react on the risk, which was in reality fixed as the most sensitive risk coming from 2021. Both of us in our conversation and our viewers and followers, including yourself, Elene, will be in charge, like in a few seconds, that we discussed various scenarios together with Michael, but still we consider that the risk which was fixed from previous year, this risk still remains, but we cannot say how how world market will react on Ukraine-Russia conflict, war happening in the middle of Europe. So there are still some advices from Mr. Preiss, and I think they will be more than welcome from our followers. So let's follow this interview.
Michael, again, thank you so much for the very short notice. You're with us, and we'll do our best, both of us, to explain to our viewers and followers what is going on in regards of world economy, what are the trends. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you, and my pleasure. Most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And so tell me, you know what, while remembering 2021, Ukrainian-Russian conflict was among the top risks which was issued by all the analysts worldwide. But nobody was wondering or thinking that the worst scenario happening in some minds might be the reality. That's where we stand. It's the 8th and 9th day from the beginning of the war.
And unfortunately, I mean, that is exactly the point. And I think, I mean, that's, again, the lesson for investors here is the following, that, again, as you rightly pointed out, I think it's important to remember that risk often travels non-linearly. Even though people were concerned about the Ukraine and the conflict with Vladimir Putin, I think many people underestimated the real political risk and also the risk of true escalation. If you might recall, apparently on the 24th of February, there was still a lot of hope in the global market that Mr. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and Anthony Blinken from the United States could meet in Geneva, Switzerland, to find a peaceful solution. But I think then what the market again was caught by surprise when this was again cancelled in the last minute, and then suddenly the bombs went off. I think this is again the true reason and a reminder for investors that risk can happen quickly, and often again, as you pointed out, non-linearly, not in a straight line, and that is often the real risk.
Are you trying to highlight that there are some new, I cannot say trends, but the estimation in regards of politics are not so much predictable as it was before? That's what you are trying to point or highlight?
Yes, I would think that is exactly what I try to potentially share with everyone. I think also again, I think the real risk is the risk of escalation, right? I mean, even for example, like even though the tragic situation in the Ukraine, of course, means that the world has to get tough on Russia and Vladimir Putin, right? But if you think about it, if the objective then is to collapse the Russian economy, that doesn't necessarily help the average Russian person either. And again, the true sad thing about all these things is often that the average person who had nothing to do with this is potentially then suffering. That's again also the concerns about sanctions, that sanctions often hit the people who are potentially the most vulnerable. And that potentially could again create negative feedback loops.
Do you think that they have already some sort of okay, let me say so, mutual understanding what kind of sanctions these are in Russia happening? Because in my understanding, Michael, it's not the end. I'm not saying that it's the beginning of the sanctions, but I think that little by little, there will be some more sanctions coming separately from some countries, and also allies like, I don't know, it's going to be EU, I mean, separately like NATO or things like that. But economic sanctions are on their way, and it's maybe it's not the beginning, but it's not the end, definitely. How well Russians do understand that unprecedented sanctions happening right now might relatively not just ruin their daily life, but might weaken their economy so much that it's going to be minus 30 year, as it happened with Iran by the end of 70s last century.
Yes, and again, this is again the unfortunate and tragic reality of these conflicts. And I think what's also important for investors to potentially consider is the relationship of China and the Russian Federation. That increasingly will be a key thing to analyze for investors and also for strategists and analysts to really understand the Russia-China relationship. That I think could be a driver of investment returns.
In my understanding, let me interrupt you for a second. Me personally, I was expecting Chinese position more active, but at the same time, they remain pragmatic, very practical, and it doesn't care. But even Kazakhstan, just a few hours ago, they announced that they will keep the neutral position. They will not be neither for Russia nor for Ukraine. At the same time, Chinese refused a few days ago, we used to have a chat on these regards, for the further disbursement of the Russian oil things. So what's happening, Michael, in your understanding?
I think it's increasingly that we're potentially seeing a new world order in many different ways, and in many different instances or senses rather. If you think about it, Switzerland historically has been a very neutral country. But now apparently also Switzerland, who has always been a safe haven country and has been neutral among the great powers, has basically decided to increasingly go with the United States and European position against Russia. So again, I think we have to understand that we're moving into a potentially uncharted new world and new geopolitical reality.
Can we say that some sort of new world constitution is on its way to come with new realities, new rules, new laws, new relations, and at the same time, everything is changing for investors as well? Am I right or not?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, for example, even this idea of what is safe money, right? I mean, historically, as everybody might recall, I mean, gold has had the status of safe money for thousands of years. But increasingly, I think the unfortunate developments in the Ukraine have also shown that, unfortunately, you cannot email gold. So when there was an urgent need for funds or donations to the Ukraine, actually cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin suddenly had a very important role in helping the less fortunate people.
Mike, you as an experienced investor and advisor for various funds, are there some sort of untouchable values for investors where they can use their pragmatic predictions during these unprecedented things happening around, while neither me nor yourself, we cannot predict how and when the conflict in Ukraine will be closed?
And look, I think the biggest risk is that risk about sanctions, and also more importantly, the determination of certain nations to enforce these sanctions, and how much they really want to go after everybody in that sense. So that's again the
personally for you, Switzerland or Chinese position was the most surprising, or it was Germany or some other things happening. Because what we see, like both me and you during this period, is unprecedented solidarity happening worldwide. Nobody could expect that sanctions would rather reflect on brands, worldwide brands, and things like happening in sport industry, gambling, culture. I don't know, everything. Yesterday I saw a list of the brands, Mike, who just refused working in Russia. It's Alphabet. It's all of them are there. All of them. They're just making statements every day. The last one is SAP. SAP, they just ignored Russian market as well.
And that again is the question for analysts. I mean, what assumptions are still valid in this new world, and which assumptions have to be completely scrapped and have to be potentially reevaluated?
But for these days, making any kind of prognosis or analysis for the nearest future, the only thing what we can definitely resume, Michael, is that we're facing the new structure of the governing of the world wealth in general. Am I right or not?
Yes, and most probably with that, we will most probably have to have a higher risk premium on equities and other risk assets, and also potentially we most probably will have to expect higher volatility in global financial markets. Because while everybody's trying to figure this out, you will have a lot of volatility in between.
Do you personally expect a global inflation rise in the nearest future?
Yeah, look, I think most likely the level of oil, the price of oil is the real question. I mean, currently we're close to $120 a barrel of oil. The real question is at what level could it really lead to a global recession? If you might recall, just before the subprime crisis in 2008, oil prices went to close to $150, and after that we had a major stock market correction. So again, a lot of these are often psychological levels. At what level is the market reacting?
And the key issue, just to make and settle everything, is to solve the conflict and to stop the war happening in Ukraine. That's the current issue right now, because markets even they cannot recall the issue like COVID is anymore. And I'm very much surprised, because COVID still exists. A virus is among us, but nobody is recalling this issue, Michael, anymore.
Again, it's the level of degree that matters, right? COVID, of course, was also very, very tragic and very difficult for many people around the world, but it's nothing like the Ukraine conflict. So again, it's a question of what is potentially more threatening to everybody.
Michael, thank you so much. And I know that how hard and difficult it is during this period to make any kind of statement, but thank you so much for your analysis, and I'll keep in touch with you, and many thanks from Georgia.
And one more thing, if you permit, if I could add. I mean, again, for investors, again, the key point here is to remember to always consider to have a well-diversified global portfolio. Just give an example. The markets far away from Europe currently are doing the best. For example, countries like Peru, according to Bloomberg data, are now the best performing stock market in the world.
And you see the key success in the diversified portfolio. It's going to be a governmental portfolio, country, or just investor. You see that as much as diversified it's going to be, that's the key issue.
Yes, I mean, look at your country where you are, Georgia. I mean, Georgia and leading stocks in Georgia, like Bank of Georgia, for instance, has been very much dragged down by the Russia and the Ukraine issue, even though potentially it's very different, isolated cases, right? And potentially, if Georgia would join the European Union, that potentially could be very positive for Georgian equities longer term. The short-term reaction was very negative. Everything in Georgia was also coming under selling pressure because it was considered to be in the neighborhood of Russia.
Yeah. Well, we cannot. Unfortunately, we cannot make choice in regards of our neighbors, Michael. Yes, and at the same time, what we face is we will use the opportunity right now, together with Moldova and Ukraine, to become the candidates for the European Union. What do you see? You might recall the history of other countries, Mike, how they were well developed. What kind of boost is for the local economy to become the member of such a big ally gathering like EU is?
My understanding is this has been usually positive, and it's very much a convergence factor. And yes, I mean, it should be, because it potentially opens a much larger market and potentially makes everything much smoother. So Ilya, I mean, the opposite of what's now happening with Russia. Russia now is being excluded from the world economy, right? But for example, if smaller nations like Georgia, for instance, would join the European Union and by a larger extent the European economic system, that would open many opportunities for many people in Georgia. So in my opinion, that should be a very strong positive.
I hope we will have same support from EU members, and I hope that Georgia will succeed together with Ukraine and Moldova. Mike, thank you so much, and see you
Thank you very
soon.
much. Thank you.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.